Yeah, let's get more reaction to all of this from former FBI agent Jonathan Gilliam, who is standing by with us. Jonathan, we've been watching the scene from outside of the courthouse and inside throughout the day as this verdict came in. Relatively peaceful, actually completely peaceful outside of the courthouse right now. Do you expect that it will stay that way?
Well, that is a good question. I will tell you this, that anybody that wants to protest against this or riot or do whatever they're going to do has to realize that they are, in fact, rioting or protesting against our legal system that is a just legal system. And this jury was a jury of Kyle Rittenhouse's peers. They were chosen the proper and legal way, and they did not make a rash, quick decision. They sat down and pondered all the evidence, which is what they're supposed to do. They had a judge that did his job. It scared me a little bit because I thought the judge there for a while was getting a little bit too into the cameras and a little bit of the acting, but he actually did a very, very good job. And I think that people got to see the reality of what occurred that night, and justice was served. And I also want everybody to realize that if they're thinking about protesting or doing any of this stuff, they need to realize that a jury of Rittenhouse's peers found him not guilty, which means that he was basically in self-defense of all of these issues. And when you look at that and you think about what these other individuals were doing to him, that is something that people need to start taking into account, is that you can't just rush out, burn a city down, and then threaten to kill somebody and point guns at them or hit them with skateboards to cause imminent threats of serious bodily injury or loss of life and expect that there's nothing going to happen. There could be consequences for these types of actions. So people need to realize that today, it's not just that Rittenhouse was found not guilty, it's that the people who did this to him were proven, in fact, to have actually threatened him in such a way that he could use lethal force. That's very important for people to realize.
And we went through the whole system. I mean, this event occurred. You had them arrested. They went through the process. They had a trial. They had 12 jurors that listened to it. You had a judge overseeing it. And the ultimate conclusion was not guilty. Then you have Mayor de Blasio coming out, basically criticizing the individual, saying something that wasn't true, that he brought a firearm across
state lines.
Then you have Andrew Cuomo, who left office in shame, who's also criticizing. And what effect does that have on the belief that the system works, the belief that actually a juror of your peers actually is supposed to work this way?
Well, I don't think that de Blasio or Cuomo was responsible for well over 15,000 deaths through his incompetence. De Blasio has destroyed an entire city. These are the two people who are least qualified to have any opinion on anything right now. And they're both narcissists. And but to answer your question, I think this has been so public, this trial, the way it's worked out. People were able to see how dangerous the prosecution can be when they are ramping things up. They are using media to go tell lies, which occurred in this case. You had Gage, I forget how to say his last name. You know, he admitted that he pointed a gun at Kyle Rittenhouse on the stand under oath, and then goes on MSNBC and lies and says that he didn't, that he was forced to do that under oath. It didn't make any sense. So what you're seeing here is the left, now that this has been tried in a just and legal manner, they're going to try to twist this in such a way in mainstream media using echo chambers like Cuomo, like de Blasio. You're not seeing people who are actual leaders in the Democrat Party. You're not seeing them do this stuff. And I mean, there's very few of these people in the Democrat Party, I think, that are leaders now. But I think you're seeing the people who are trying to make a name for themselves by keeping their voice relevant on the left come out and say ridiculous stuff like this. I don't think it's going to have any effect.
What about the effect on any other trials that happen to be going on, specifically the Arbery trial in Georgia, where you have a black man shot and killed by 3 white men?
What I hope that this affects the most are people who are called to be a juror, because they can see that people can actually sit down and make a decision based on facts, regardless of how skewed they may be by a prosecutor or defense attorney. And I think those other cases, if the defense attorneys lay it out correctly, if the prosecutors are not looking to make a name for themselves based on their ideology, you can get justice in these circumstances. And in all these circumstances, it's important for us to see that now cameras and video play a huge part in this, but it also plays a huge part when you have prosecutors skewing evidence. And I really do believe that the way they were playing with these videos and the way that they were testing this judge by bringing up things that should not be brought up in court about somebody's Fifth Amendment right to be silent, I think that the judge and the jury got it right. And that's what I hope. If you're called to be a juror, that you leave your ideology, your political affiliation behind, and you sit and listen to the facts of the case, and then you find a person innocent or, guilty or not guilty. You don't find someone innocent. You find them not guilty if they can't prove it. And in this case, I think Kyle Rittenhouse was innocent, but I think they definitely proved that he was not guilty.
All right, Jonathan Gilliam, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.